We do these webinars, welcome first of all, we do these webinars together with Barcelona Metropolitan, the leading magazine for the English-speaking community in and around Barcelona. It's a very useful resource for information for expats, international people. Today we are going to talk about the property market again. This is part of our real estate series, episode 11 in the meanwhile. And today we talk about a market update. We do this frequently, these webinars. For those people who do not know me, my name is Raf Jacobs. I'm a long-term Barcelona resident. With our team, we advise people in the entire process of planning for an acquisition of a property in Spain, helping them with the search, with the evaluation, with the due diligence, legal checks, technical checks, negotiations, proper contracts, going to a notary, all these kind of things for our customers. We're not going to talk about that today, but this is just a bit of introduction and content. I do teach at the Barcelona University, specifically in the real estate master, the Master Inmobiliario, directed by Gonzalo Bernardos, the #1 opinion maker for real estate in Spain. And I'm also spokesperson, go-to person for the Barcelona City Council, for the international community, for property-related topics. And there is an event organized by the City Council in October. It's called the Expat Day, Barcelona Expat Day. That's coming up. You'll probably see some publicity in the future. We will be there as well. I will be running a live session there as well, so we can meet there in person if you would like to. We talked a lot about the property market, well, in every webinar, but specifically because of COVID, I made some predictions April last year, I think, April 2020, about what I thought was going to happen because of COVID, and with property, with prices, with transactions, with the type of buyers, with agencies, and so on. We updated then our predictions in February this year, and all these things are public on our website, on the blog. In July, just before summer, we had a session which was called "Is there a new real estate boom coming in Spain?" with a question mark. I shared a lot of arguments there, or explaining that I saw a lot of ingredients for a potential real estate boom. So today we're going to give an update and talk about what has happened, what do I think is going to happen, what are the implications for you. This is going to be a shorter webinar than the normal ones, at least that's my intention. I'll speak less. There's more time for you as well for questions afterwards. You can write your questions in the chat box. There's a button at the bottom of your screen, and I will address them one by one at the end of the session. All right. Everything I mentioned, so how do I build my opinion? I'm not just reading something in the newspaper and then replicating it or so. There's 3 main sources, and this makes it a pretty unique combination of insights, and positions me quite well to, for example, do the teaching, but also accompany buyers, investors on their journey. So one angle is, a very important one is, as an economist, I analyze the market constantly. We look at data, at trends, etc., linked to what I do at the University of Barcelona in the master program. There's obviously a big network of people. That's one angle to look at the market, so the market analytics, let's say. 2, and incredibly useful, is the reality, the day-to-day feeling with what is happening in the property market in Spain, not just in Barcelona. We operate Barcelona and most of the places where international people buy, so mainly the coasts, typically, also a bit inland. But that feeling gives us a lot of very tangible, empirical information about what buyers are doing, what sellers are doing, what banks are doing, across different parts of the country. This also shows us what can go right, where the problems are, how the notaries see transactions, how we need to get around certain problems that might pop up, and so on. And the third one is industry conversations, and I'll refer to this later, but talking and having built an extensive network with banks, with realtors, with developers of new developments for new build properties, with university, gives extremely useful insights. And I try and combine these things in the session here today for you. So when is the best time to buy a property? And these are a few screenshots from Spanish media, very recent ones. But when you ask a question, when is the best time to buy? The answer is, and I'm clearer than I've ever been before, I think, now. The best time is probably now. We've explained in previous sessions and since last year that COVID would bring opportunities for buyers. That has happened. Prices have dropped significantly across Spain, around 10% in Barcelona, sometimes more on holiday properties, second homes on the coast. I always have said that wouldn't last forever. Now we are at a tipping point in the market. We see now an increased level of transactions. We see upward price pressure. People from Expansión and Idealista interviewed me last week, and one of the things they say is like in English, and specifically for international buyers, which I think many of you are potential buyers, an increase of the of international buyers in Spain, a new real estate boom, they call it, acceleration of transactions, etc. So that is what we read in the news. My opinion is, if you want to buy a property, it is time to start hurrying. You don't need to start rushing and doing crazy things, but we are coming to the end of a certain period in terms of property market cycles. If you need to sell, and there might be people on the call who is going to sell, the good properties, so good properties at good locations at a good price, they will fly. They will sell very quickly. As of when? Again, as of now. In July, we said we saw all the ingredients to make this happen. Now we see that it is happening. This doesn't come as a surprise. Some people and also people from our customers, right? Some people are very good at grabbing that opportunity. They have made fantastic purchases, and all their friends are jealous. And how is it possible that property, that location just for that price? Yes, that happened. It is still happening. But we also see people that continuously doubt. They never take a decision. They always think that something better will exist, and those people miss the train. They will miss the opportunity, and they might regret it in a few months from now, because they're just seeing more and more properties, and always question. There's always a con on a property, and that's true. I think the perfect property doesn't exist, but if you only look at the cons and you don't see the big picture, but additionally you don't see the momentum, then you will miss opportunities. All right. So there is now some, if you're a type of buyer and you want to strike a very good deal, a great deal, then you should start to take action in the very short term. So, is there a bubble coming in Spain? No. I said there's a boom. I said the boom is different from a bubble. And let's just clarify this point, because in the past, 2008, that's 12, 13 years ago. In the meanwhile, there was a big bubble caused by the financial markets and the property markets and so on. So today we don't see any signs for a bubble. Just want to make this clear. And why not? Because there's a lot of things that we don't have today, and that you need to create a bubble. One, there's no oversupply in the market. 2008, the new developments were everywhere. There was way too much supply on the market. There were very toxic mortgages. There was the mortgage laws that you have today protect the consumer a lot more than the past. Very toxic mortgages, people with fairly low incomes taking too high mortgages on, can't pay them back, problems, etc. Interest rates are very low compared to 12, 13 years ago. There's less speculation in the market. And the banks have also become a lot more cautious with their financing, specifically to the developers, people who buy land and build properties. They don't finance land anymore in general. You need to pay that yourself as an investor. They finance part of the building works. Okay, so that's a totally different story. So just to clarify, a boom, yes, no bubble. What does it mean? The key takeaways, and let's just dive into it right away. I see six elements that I'd like to share with you as part of this market update. What is different from a few months ago, and what you need to know if you want to buy or sell properties. First of all, we start to see a shortage of good properties in key markets, not everywhere in Spain. Okay. Secondly, demand is up and will continue to increase both from local buyers, Spanish people, and international buyers. Okay, Spain has, third point, Spain has become relatively cheaper compared to other countries. I'll come to that later. The gap has widened, so it's relatively more attractive to buy in Spain. You can buy more property here relatively compared to many other countries in Europe or the US or other parts of the world. Expect price increases for the remaining part of this year, not everywhere, and certainly for next year. There is intensified mortgage race going on between the banks in Spain to capture local international customers. The banks become very aggressive, have also changed their approach in terms of financing. It's not just the interest rates they changed. And six, this is maybe not new, but more and more people realize it. When you compare renting a property to owning a property, in many cases, owning wins that comparison. Owning, the numbers are just way better. And actually, I did a specific webinar on that, renting or buying, episode 6, I think. If I'm not wrong, you can check. There's an article as well on the. Because maybe we can share the link in the chat box for that article. There's good numbers in there. But that are the point. Shortage, increased demand. Spain is relatively cheaper. You shall expect price increases as of now in many parts. And if you're renting, if you do the numbers, owning is for many people a lot more interesting. So let's look at these points now, one by one. The first one we said, shortage, not everywhere. Barcelona is the first place where we've seen shortage of supply, shortage of good properties on the market that you can evaluate, that you can consider for buying. Barcelona is in Spain. It's a leading indicator. It's a market that, generally speaking, moves first. For the good and for the bad. When the market recovers, Barcelona is typically the first one. Madrid follows, then the rest. When the market drops, Barcelona often first, Madrid follows, then the rest. And that's because you have all segments of the residential property market are very active in Barcelona, meaning people who buy a place to live themselves, people who buy a second residence, people who buy a property as an investment, people who change from renting to owning a property, all totally different segments, different buyer profiles. They're all very active here. But in addition, we have a very strong local demand, Spanish, Catalan demand, plus very strong international demand. So that's why Barcelona is one of the most dynamic, or I think the most dynamic market, a good indicator for changes in cycles in the property market. We see this shortage as well taking place in the Canaries, for instance, Canary Islands, for example, or in the Balearics. And that is how do you see that? Well, for instance, good properties sell faster than 2-3 months ago, faster than 1 month ago. You see a property, you say, I like this apartment. By the time you get back to the agent, it might be reserved already. So reservations are done quicker. That also means that the negotiation potential for good properties becomes lower because they go fast. And people, I've said this many times in previous webinars, my expectation was that the international buyers would come back, and they have come back, and they are coming back, they will come back more, will pay more than the market price from a few months ago, because there is emotion involved. They want to secure their property in Spain. They have some more savings, etc. So that's not coming as a surprise. But in terms of numbers, as part of a market update as well, in the first 6 months of this year, in Spain, we have had 267,000 transactions of property, buy-sell transactions of properties. That is a lot. To put it in perspective, when I say it's a lot, it means it's the highest number since 2008, right? And that is significant, because we went from 2008 to a massive crisis that bottomed in 2013. Then the market recovered gradually but intensively till 2019. Now, the first 6 months, more transactions than the last 12 years. Prices didn't go up yet because there was stock on the market. And certainly in many parts of Spain, on the coast, in the south, there's a lot of finished properties ready to sell that were kind of on the shelf. They were waiting for buyers. So the market, the buyers have been absorbing these properties. That's why we see transactions going up, but prices not yet, or not yet much. In some areas, they went up already. Prices go up with a delay. What we see in Canaries or in Balearics is that transactions are not increasing that much, but prices are already increasing. So that's again the elements that I explained before. They play there. They are relevant there. So this year we probably get in Spain maybe not a normal year, probably not a normal year, but 450,000, 480,000 transactions is very, very feasible for 2021, and next year above 500,000 transactions again. Towards the second part or the end of last year, it's hard to say. I think we will be back at the levels of the pre-COVID market in terms of transactions. But again, when transactions go up, prices will go up as well, before we already know. In terms of foreign buyer activity, because if you're an international buyer, if you live here already in Spain or not yet, most of the 80-20 rule is that you want a certain type of property, which is often different from what local people are looking for. Well located, beautiful properties, charm, etc. Bit higher price range sometimes. International buyers didn't disappear. There was a big drop 2020. You don't see it in the numbers, statistics too much, because we buy a lot of new developments, and they were purchase decisions from 2019 that were materialized in 2020. But in between April and June this year, we had 227 foreign buyers per day in Spain. That is 13,500 or so 600 in a quarter. 1,100 per week. That's a big number. It's not where it was before. But it's not much below what we had in 2019, 2018, and so on. Okay. The UK dropped a lot. UK buyers, British buyers dropped a lot, because not only because of COVID, because all countries dropped because of COVID, but we see now as well the reality of Brexit with additional cost, additional complexity is stopping some buyers or slowing down some buying processes there. So that's why when we say shortage, specifically again in Barcelona, we see the lot we saw this morning in a transaction where we really liked the property, wanted to go after it, and half an hour later, when the buyer said, yeah, let's go for it, it was reserved already. With very, very low negotiation potential. The price went down a little bit, a few thousand euros, symbolic, and that's it. It was gone. So that's point number one, which is the shortage on what I want to say next is let me stop sharing the screen for a moment, because I don't have a slide. We don't need slides for this. So you should see me now again, I think. Then the second part is demand. we said both local and national demand is coming back and will come back to the market. There's a lot of reasons for that. And I explained a lot of this in the previous webinar, why I think a boom was possible. But it's basically, there's a strong economic outlook for Spain, with GDP growth amongst the highest in Europe, 5 to 7% this year, probably 5 to 7% next year. That's a lot. That's good for the local buyers. It's good for banks to give financing to people. People have built up savings during COVID, so they have a higher purchasing power. More than ever, international buyers want that climate. It's one of the things we discussed in the interview with Expansión and with Idealista. Being confined during several months in a Northern European country or in the UK or some parts of the US, for instance, wasn't a pleasure. The climate becomes very important. But also people have learned to live with COVID. It's still around, obviously it's still around, but it's much more controlled. There's more confidence again from the buyers. And then something that is a very important factor for as an incentive for people to buy properties abroad, to buy something in Spain, is the option for teleworking, for remote working. 90% of our customers today, if they don't live here, they mention that they would like to have a place in their property here, in their house or apartment, where they can or could work remotely. We see a lot of people that come for several weeks instead of a long weekend. What was their initial plan? Again, we see the demand in all segments of the market, as discussed before. But also, I mentioned before in the introduction that Spain has become relatively cheaper. And what does that mean? So, for instance, in a lot of countries, property prices have gone up during COVID in the last 1.5 years, let's say. In the US, in the UK, in Germany, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in Canada, New Zealand, and more countries. In Spain, the opposite happened. Prices dropped. And here is a graph that visualizes that. This is the EU, so it's not including the other countries I mentioned, but this is a year-on-year price change for properties for all countries in Europe. Spain is the second last country on the list, just before Cyprus, where prices dropped a lot. You still see a small increase here because this is based on asking price data for properties, not on deal prices. Or deal prices were lower, there was negotiation potential. But when you are in countries like Germany, where prices have gone up by around 10% and keep going up, in the same in Netherlands and Belgium and so on, everything becomes expensive and investment becomes very difficult. A second residence on the coast might become very difficult. Spain has become cheaper. So if your country goes up by 10%, Spain goes down by 10 to 15%, the gap is nearly 20-25%, relatively speaking. And that is a big number that makes it very attractive for people when they evaluate their options. So I mentioned as well, we expect here price increases for, as of now, for the rest of this year and next year. This means that, or this is partially due to the demand, as we discussed, the factors that we talked about. So the lower negotiation potential comes into play here, increased prices. The gap between the asking price and the deal price. So asking price is what you see on, let's say, Idealista, which is the largest property platform in Spain. Asking price, 300,000 euros. The deal price, let's say, in the past would have been, let's say, 290. What happened during COVID, in line with what we expected, that the gap between asking and deal would widen. People didn't drop the asking price, at least not many people, but the deal price, you could get a better deal in the negotiation. You had to fight for it, but you could get a way better price. That gap is now again closing. Not yet the asking price going up, but it's the deal price going up, becoming closer to the asking price, less negotiation potential. This is not going to happen everywhere at the same time. This is happening now in the center of Barcelona. This is happening, as we said, in the Canaries, the Balearics. This is happening in some specific smaller locations where there is high international demand plus high local demand. This could be Sitges if you're in Barcelona. This could be some parts of on the coast, very specific places with high demand and good properties. It will happen first in these places, and then on the coast, and then in the rest of Spain. Okay, so it's not immediate everywhere, but it is happening already in the markets we discussed. The fifth point, so we talked about shortage, demand is going up, a widening gap between Spain and other countries in terms of relative prices, price increases. The fifth point is the mortgage race, the mortgage war between banks. And this is something that we obviously we help our customers in the transactions. When they take a mortgage, when they want a mortgage, I help them evaluate what is possible financially speaking. If you have 60,000 euro savings, what mortgage can I get? Up to what purchase price can I buy a property, and making sure all the costs are paid for, taxes and notary and so on. So we see it there, but also when a very good relationships with people that are responsible for mortgages, for instance, for Banc Sabadell in Catalonia, for UCI in Barcelona, for Bank Inter on the Costa Blanca, for different parts. What we see is three important points regarding the banks and the financing. One is banks watch a lot more the industry that you are working for. For instance, and they become more selective. If you work in aviation, in tourism, in events, in hotels or related sectors, it becomes a lot more difficult to get financing. And that's still because of what happened in these sectors because of the economic slowdown. The second point they look at is the work contract that you have. You need to justify stable recurring income. Now, we see a lot of people that are renting that, for instance, either just started a new job in Barcelona and have a probation period in their contract, or they come from their home country, from Finland, from Netherlands, from the US, UK to Spain. They work for the same company, but they move to a Spanish labor contract. That can be a problem sometimes. If there is probation period in there, the banks are very, very reluctant to do that. So that's a way for banks to limit risks. Banks don't want risks. The second thing they do is to have less risk is to ask more guarantees to you as a buyer. More guarantees can mean that they want you to put some of your savings into an investment fund, into just block some savings, just block 10,000 euros, 15,000 euros on a bank account, just in case. They might ask you to take specific insurances in case you would lose your job, your income, that insurance covers for a certain number of months your mortgage commitments to the bank. Or they might ask if you have other properties with no or limited mortgages on it, to provide a second property to even buy only one property. You say you want to buy an apartment in Barcelona for €500,000, and the bank says, well, we can finance you, let's say, up to 300,000 euros. But if you provide your second property as a guarantee as well, we can go to 500,000. And we see banks financing 100% of the purchase price of the property and all the costs. And that's massive. Huh? That's a mortgage race that although in the past banks wouldn't do that. Not for all people, not for all profiles, but it's happening. It depends afterwards if the second guarantee comes from yourself or from your parents, for instance. Then they ask you maybe 10% as a down payment, but even that is a very low number. So, and my third point was going beyond 80% financing, beyond 80% loan to value is possible in certain cases when you meet certain requirements. Etc. And the banks compete very strongly there. We see banks that in the past were not very active, were not participating in the race, and they've changed position in, I think, the last 3-4 weeks. Example, CaixaBank, BBVA, fairly traditional banks that were not interested in competing hard. They go now, we're looking at mortgages where both CASA and BBVA compete against a way smaller bank, and they go with interest rates 1.15% fix on 25 or 30 years, with not too many other products they want to sell you. Just having a salary and taking a house insurance. That's new in the market. We didn't see this before. We see banks like Sabadell or UCI. They're very strong with international buyers. They work a lot with many of our customers. They might not go that low with interest rates, but they can be very flexible on other terms and go very high in percentage financing sometimes, mainly UCI. So that is other advantages. We see banks like Liberbank, who was very aggressive in Catalonia and Barcelona. They're not sure what happened there, but they are not active anymore. I think they left the race. They left the competition. So we don't see them anymore. You have Bank Inter, Evo Bank, so banks with less offices, but very aggressive offerings, sometimes below 1% fixed interest rate. Again, you need to have a good profile, but even for people with let's say 40 or 50,000 euro savings, wanting to buy a property of around 200,000 euros, those banks can make very interesting mortgage proposals for you. You lock it in, like every month exactly how much you will pay, and if you buy a property to rent it out, so as an investment, you use the bank as a lever. It's I would recommend, if your financials allow it, to put as less own funds in as possible into the transaction. You leverage the bank and you get incredible returns, double-digit returns, 10% plus, 15% is certainly possible by leveraging by putting less money in and working with the bank. So we talked about there was a fifth point on our list. I'll share my screen again just to keep the structure, and then all right, there we go. There was a mortgage war and a different approach from the banks. And then when we compare, when you rent and you think of buying a property, it is just very interesting. There is a specific webinar on this topic in an article, but I recovered 1 or 2 slides on this. So very briefly, because you can read it in detail. If you rent a property in Spain and you pay, let's say, €1,000 per month, it means you pay 12,000 euros per year. But you need to look at the financial plan, at your investments, at your assets with a certain horizon, right? So let's look at 10 years. In 10 years, that's 120,000 euro that you would spend on rent. That's money that's gone. You don't get anything in return. It's for the landlord. So you make the landlord wealthier, but you can't do anything else anymore because that money is gone. It's clear. Now, look at it from the other side. This is the same table here. Table on the right. When you have a net income, let's say your net income is 2,500 euros, all right, means 30,000 net per year. It means that if you rent a property at 1,000 euro per month, that over 10 years, you need to work 4 years of full annual income just to pay the rent, right? And that is, I think, an interesting starting point, a reflection point, to start thinking, am I doing the right thing? Because the money that is gone to rent, you can't invest anymore. You can't use it in the future for as a down payment, as a deposit. So that is gone. So it's something, keep that in mind. Again, look at the webinar article. Here's an example. If you have 100,000 euro savings, what can you do? So if you rent a property at 1,000 per month, you can rent during 8 or 3 years, and then your 100,000 euro is gone. You keep it on the bank account. The banks are starting in Spain now to charge money for deposits. You can go to the stock market. But again, if you go to the stock market, for instance, you can invest 100,000 euros. If you buy a property and you leverage the bank, you can buy a property, that's what I say here, depending on the loan to value percentage, between 250 and 500,000 euros, sometimes even more than 500,000 euros. But let's say you get a property of 400,000 euros, just a simple example. You only put 100,000 in. but you get, if you rent it out, you get the rental returns of a property of 100,000 euros, of 400,000 euros. You put 100, you get the returns from a property that's worth 400. If you ever resell it, you get the gains on a property of 400,000, not on a property of 100,000. So you can, that's a big lever to use. That are the points that I wanted to share with you today. That are, I think we are we're at a tipping point in the property market in Spain. If you're thinking of buying, you want to make the best deal. If you wait longer, you will miss opportunities, certainly. If you wait longer, or if you doubt too much, that's why we always recommend preparation is key. When you're prepared, when you know your financials, when you are realistic in terms of, with my lifestyle, with my budget, the areas I like, the type of property I like, what is possible. If we have had those workshops with you and we are aligned, you can act on opportunities and materialize them. And have jealous friends who say, like, I also want a property that good as this one for only that amount of money. If you don't do preparation properly, or if you doubt too long, you will miss opportunity. So this may be not a message you want to hear, but that is the reality. I need to inform you of that. That's what we see in the market. It's what I expect to see more in the market in the next, let's say, 12 to 15 months. Then let's open up for questions. I'm going to look at the chat here. So, okay, we've posted some. Jeff has posted some links to the articles that I referred to in the chat here, so you can click on it and open it. There's a question here: is the new pandemic remote work trend also affecting the market, the marketing positively? It is, can you work? You can work wherever you want. Yes, it increases demand. It increases also demand for a certain type of properties, specifically the property that international buyers like. Properties with a bit more space, with light, a lot of natural light. So increases demand, and when your property has those features, it will sell a lot quicker and or at a higher price. So yes, the same is true if it's not an apartment. For houses well connected to the, for instance, Barcelona or other main cities, well connected with a garden and or a pool, facilities for kids, the same happens there. Could you share any expectations on inflation and interest rates expected in Spain for coming years to understand flow in cash money to other sources of equity? So there is no model, of course, to just look at. It's about expectations, as you correctly say. There is no, we don't see any indicators that interest rates would go up significantly in the near future. I think in the next year or so, we don't see indicators. I've confirmed that opinion with different banks, with decision makers at different banks. I think that is where we are going. So from that point of view, they remain at historic low levels or very close to those levels. Now, inflation is different. Inflation might occur, is occurring in some markets, in some countries. It's probably hard to avoid when the economic growth starts. But what we see is that a lot of people decided actually to buy a property to protect themselves from inflation. Because when you have a property and you rent it out, your rental income typically goes up with the price index. So that's a fantastic way to protect you from inflation. Okay. What we see, so that is one reason why people say property is interesting. But equally, if you look at alternative options today that give you a low risk investment for your savings, there is none on the market, right? Bank accounts are zero interest rate or negative interest rates, depending on which banks and how much money you have. The stock market is very volatile. Yes, you can do private banking if you are sufficiently wealthy to do that, and then you might go to specific funds and they promise 10% returns and so on. But you also get that if you leverage the bank and get a mortgage and buy a property, rent it out, and you have an asset. You've got bricks. Okay, so do you think the increase will catch up or even go higher, the 10% lost in this year? So I think we talk here about prices. It's going to be, the answer is going to be very diverse for Spain. In the short term, the properties that let's for instance take Barcelona. Properties that lost most value are properties located in the very center, in areas where there's a lot of tourism involved, properties that suddenly became empty and people needed to sell them, so they lost a lot. They will recover fairly quickly. They can recover. I don't think they will go this year or next year on average above 10%, but I can certainly imagine that properties with potential can go up more than 10%. Can perfectly imagine that. The 10% is, was example for Barcelona. We see properties on the coast that went 10, 15, minus 20% in some cases as well. So, but there is it's going to be a longer cycle. It's not going to be that quick, but the initial part I think is going to can be quite quickly, because from suddenly demand will come back. There is accumulated demand from buyers. So buyers that just have frozen their plans for a certain number of weeks and months during COVID, they didn't lose their dream, they didn't lose their plans, they still want to buy the property here. They will come back, but there will be a peak in demand in the short term. So there will be price peaks in some parts for good properties that international people like. Yes, for sure. Also because many of those people will buy more emotionally and less rationally. Okay. What is a good property, size-wise, location-wise? Depends which. I thought a bit about. I talked a bit about it already. So if you say city center Barcelona, what is a good property? 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, maybe 2, a little balcony, not a terrace, little balcony, elevator from the 2nd floor onwards. So you have less noise and more light in a building that doesn't need massive maintenance in the next years. That is what a lot of buyers love as a property. If it's nicely decorated and it's just beautiful, the look and feel is great. It's even a better or a great property. But a good property can also be the characteristics I mentioned, but a property that needs a full renovation, a full upgrade, because then the business case becomes stronger. You spend less money on it, and need so both are. If you look at the coasts, for instance, Costa Blanca, Costa del Sol, Costa Brava, it's more around the quality of the house, the connectivity, the facilities around, some private space, garden, and or swimming pool, or in a complex where you have several properties together with a shared facility, shared swimming pool, tennis courts, playground for kids, and so on. That is properties that people value more, apartments and houses, now than before COVID, because they work from home, they spend more time at home, etc. You know the split between local buy versus foreign buy, including source of foreign. Yeah, so foreign buyers are, so as I said before, we had in the 2nd quarter 13,600 foreign buyers. I think probably very similar for the rest of the year. That would take us to no, sorry, what I'm saying, that is around 12% of the market volume of all transactions, more or less. 11, 12%. In a normal year, 2018, 2019, it was 1 percentage point, maybe 2 percentage points higher. But again, it's largely because of the travel restrictions. People can't travel, so it didn't really drop. The proportion of foreign buyers didn't really dropped a little bit. The biggest drop was with the English, with the British buyers. And the main countries buying are UK, France, Germany, Belgium. That's a top four. And then you have a longer list, a longer tail of the curve. You have any suggestions on responsive banks in Barcelona? My experience up to now is difficult to get appointments. Yeah, I perfectly understand what you talk about. Banks are very difficult to deal with. We actually did a little bit of research. We asked our network. We launched a poll to lots of people, and we asked for their experience with banks. And no single person would recommend his own bank. I think 80% of people didn't trust their own bank and their advisor. People thought the banks were inefficient, they were charging abusive costs, etc., etc. We have a graph of like 8 or 10 or so reasons or feedback from people. Nobody gave a positive answer. So I understand your situation. It's very difficult. That is why what we do is in the very first step when we speak with, okay, if you say I want to buy a property, I would set up a private conversation with you, private Zoom meeting. I need to understand your plans better. I give you my initial feedback on how I see them. Are they realistic? Is this possible? What would I do? What to think about, etc. What to consider. And then the next step is really the first real action is that we speak about your financials, and I make your recommendations regarding what I would request from the banks. What do I think? What scenarios do I think we need to ask the banks to prepare for your situation, to understand what is possible? I don't want just an answer from your bank saying, don't worry, when you have a property, come to us. That is unacceptable. What we need is scenarios, options on the table that allows you to act quickly and get the best possible deal. I do that work with the banks. We have these net relationships, not with people that work, let's say, at a branch of a bank, but with decision makers several levels up in the hierarchy of the organizations, where we get generally very quick responses, very tangible responses in terms of numbers, terms and conditions, interest rates, durations, etc. So feel free to drop me an email at raf@inspireapartments.com, and then we can get you in touch if you want to. But there is no one bank that I would say that is better in terms of service than other banks. They all are under massive pressure. They're going through mergers and acquisitions. It's reorganizations. It's complex. So that's why it's a difficult part of our job, but it's an absolutely necessary part before we start looking at properties with you. Are certain markets better or cheaper than others? For example, are there more new construction properties in Valencia than in Barcelona that are good deals? Well, John, I think the short answer is yes. There is a lot of difference between markets. Spain is diverse, north to south or east to west. You have maybe not 1,000, but more or less 1,000 kilometers, I would say, or a day drive. Markets, you have very local markets, markets where tourists active, where people buy second residences mainly. For instance, on the Costa Blanca, for instance, which is part of Valencia. Or Barcelona is a different type of profile, different type of buyer. You can buy properties in Spain starting at, you can have fairly good properties in some parts of Spain starting at 100,000 euros, 80,000 euros, 115,000 euros. Yes, but the area is different. We need to see what I said before, the balance between what you expect while you buy a property. What is your lifestyle? How do you want to enjoy it if it's for yourself? Your budget, the numbers, the locations, and the property features, how big, how beautiful, how modern, etc., the views. All these things need to be balanced, and then we need to see what becomes realistic for you. That doesn't only apply when you say Valencia versus Barcelona. That also applies when people say, I want to buy an apartment in Barcelona, because some people say apartment Barcelona, 500,000 euro Eixample, but you can't compare the Carrer Brook with Enrique Granados with Carrer Viladomat, right? They're totally different streets, sometimes similar buildings, different prices, different people living there. So even there, it becomes these types of workshop of deep dives are important. We do the maps on the table with color markers, very interactive, with examples on screen of properties and pros and cons. And it depends. Some people have a preference for location, other people they prefer a lower price. Some people need to be close to a certain office or whatever. Yeah, I think your question is right. The answer is yes, but there's no single answer to this question. Maybe one more point. There are more new construction properties on the coast. In Barcelona, there is no free piece of land available anymore. There is simply not. You find them maybe in Hospitalet, so south, maybe in Badalona, north. Barcelona, it's very difficult to find them. You find buildings they renovate entirely, so they leave the facade, they renovate everything behind. It's very good projects, but there's not too many of them. But we know most of them. We visited most of them. We've technically inspected them. We know how they work, so we can advise. New construction is a bit more expensive than existing properties typically, but also there, because of COVID, we see potential discounts sometimes, because those investors need to make a business case work, and they might need some liquidity in some cases. So I'm at the end of the list of questions. We're nearly at the top of the hour. I think it's the first time we spent so much time on questions within the hour. Any more questions? So please write them here or open your microphone. That's also an option. And otherwise, we're gonna. I'll wait a little bit. Yeah, we're still gonna launch a poll. Can we launch that? We put a lot of effort in preparing these webinars. They're for free. But tell us as well, please, if you find them helpful. How inspiring do you find them? On 10 being, yeah, this is really helpful for me, inspirational. That gives us a good view of if we should keep doing this. If there are specific topics that are not covered here and you would like to see covered, drop them in the chat box and let me know, because I will certainly take them into account. If you, on the other side, if you have specific plans for buying a property, reach out to us. I'll share the contact details. So typically 2 things can happen. So either you're still looking or thinking about maybe buying a property. But if you have seen a property already, or you are searching and you say, I've seen 3, 4, 5 properties, I like them, or I've seen them online, but I live in California, so it's hard for me to visit them. Let's have a conversation. Let's make it tangible. Let's start talking about specific properties, get our view. If you're not here, we can pre-visit them for you. Maybe we know the property already, maybe we've seen it already, or we know the owner, or we know the building and the community there and the problems they might have. So free consultation, 20, 30 minutes of my time just for you, one-to-one. If you want, if you have properties, or if you're thinking of starting, etc., or if you just want to stay informed, go to our blog. Here's the link, and I think if you register for the newsletter, you get the updates. We don't send many newsletters. We don't send publicity about what we do. We try to keep it very relevant, informational for our audience. You can watch the webinars again. Here is a list of topics that you might find interesting. This is a short selection. There's an article and a webinar specifically on the buying process. What are the steps you need to go through as a buyer? Where does it often go wrong? I explained that in that article and webinar. Secondly, the interview with Expansión and Idealista here, the future of foreign buyers in Spain. That's my view, was published last week. If you rent and you want to buy, there's a webinar. There's also an article actually with tables, with examples, explanations. A lot of international people explain in 1 or 2 minute videos how their experience of buying has been. So people be accompanied. They didn't know where to start. They were very worried, very nervous. And a few months later, 2, 3, 4, 5 months later, depending, they share what they think is relevant for you when you think today about buying a property. When you are today at a situation that they were at 4 months ago. So they do that in 1-2 minutes. Mortgages, if you this webinar on that, and much more information on our blog. Thank you everyone for joining. It was a pleasure. And if you liked it, feel free to give us a like on our social channels on Facebook or on YouTube or so. Thanks a lot. We will close the session here. Thank you very much.